It was round 4 today of the hostage prisoner swap in the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal. 3 Israeli hostages came home in return for 183 Palestinian prisoners who were returned to their homes, many of whom were sentences. As officials look ahead to talks to extend the ceasefire to phase 2. More in this next report. Take a look.
Celebrations and relief all round, in Israel and in Gaza. Sighs of relief for families of 3 men taken hostage on October 7th, 483 days they spent in Hamas captivity. On the other side, 25 Palestinian prisoners taken by Israel come home to family and friends. The first of a lot of 183 who arrived on Saturday. The picture signifies that the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal is on track, at least for now. Early on Saturday morning, Hamas men handed over French-Israeli Ofer Calderon and Israeli national Yarden Bibas to the Red Cross at Khan Yunis in a quiet, swift move with few onlookers. American-Israeli Keith Segal was handed over at another place in Gaza an hour later. All 3 are back in Israel. As the Israeli Prime Minister tweeted a personal welcome to each of them, and the President expressed the promise that all the hostages would be back soon. On the other side, in Gaza, a visible contrast in the boisterousness of the returning Palestinian prisoners. A bus with 25 prisoners was the first to cross over. 183 were released in all. Of the 183, over a dozen are reportedly serving life sentences. 111 were arrested after the 7th of October 2023. This is the 4th swap of hostages for prisoners since the ceasefire began on the 19th of January. It takes the number of hostages released so far to 18. 33 hostages are to be freed in the first phase of the ceasefire in all. In return, Israel is to release nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. Another key development, the Rafah border reopens. Close to 50 wounded Palestinians needing medical treatment crossed into Egypt from Gaza. The crossing that Gaza calls its gateway to the world has been closed to civilians since May last year. Looking ahead, Israel and Hamas are to start negotiating a second phase of the ceasefire next week. This round calls for release of the remaining hostages and extending the truce indefinitely. And if there is no agreement again this time, the war could resume in early March. Returning to that nightmare would be a horror beyond definition. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, for more on this, joining us live on the broadcast is Chris Doyle, Director of CABU and the current lead spokesperson for CABU. Mr. Doyle, thank you so much for joining me here on the broadcast on WION World is One. Now, let me start with what's to come. This is the 4th exchange. It has been marred with a lot of hiccups at each level. We've seen it every week. After this, phase 2 needs to be discussed. How fluid or how volatile or how uncertain do you feel phase 2 will be?
It's extremely unclear where this will all go, whether it will survive the 3 phases of the deal that was agreed on the 15th of January. But thus far, despite these bumps, despite these hiccups, we've had release of hostages, release of detainees and prisoners, and so far, so good. And remember also, at the same time as we get these releases, which are joyous moments, of course, for all the loved ones on both sides, both Israelis and Palestinians being reunited with their families, there's also been a huge surge in the amount of life-saving humanitarian aid allowed into Gaza, 600 trucks minimum every day, and also the return, of course, of Palestinians to what remains of their homes. Sometimes their homes in northern Gaza cannot be identified, even the street cannot be identified, but that, as we saw earlier this week, was another very, very powerful moment. So to get to a stage where we are now seeing talks about phase 2 is crucial, because it is at this point that there are members of the Israeli cabinet serving with Prime Minister Netanyahu who say that actually we should be, Israel that is, resuming military operations. Are we going to get to that?
Yes.
Or will there be pressure from the outside to say, no, implement the deal in full, go full ahead with the deal?
Now, pressure, let me just take it further from there, Mr. Doyle. Major Arab nations have rejected Trump's suggestion of clearing out Palestinians from Gaza. Now, if you were to look at the equation, you mentioned about the internal politics in Israel. Of course, there are differing camps wanting different things for Gaza, but Trump doesn't want Palestinians in Gaza. Israel doesn't want Hamas in Gaza. Arab nations don't want Trump's plan for Gaza. Who do you feel will handle Gaza now after this?
Well, I think that, Donald Trump has made an opening bid, and I think there is a strong argument to say that whilst he is putting pressure on Egypt and Jordan to accept 1.5 million Palestinians from Gaza, he may well be seeing this as the opening part of a transactional deal that he is so fond of trying to implement. But it has always been a red line for Egypt that it could not accept Palestinians from Gaza. It would make it complicit in the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. It would also pose quite challenging problems for the Egyptian authorities to maintain control within Egypt, a country that is also going through some very tough economic times. And for Jordan also, it's long given up any hope to or ambition to take over the West Bank. It has said very clearly, the king has said this, Palestine is for the Palestinians, Jordan is for Jordanians. They also want to make sure that nobody thinks that they have ambitions in this conflict. And remember, Jordan is one of the most arid countries on earth. It doesn't have the natural resources. It has been already a recipient of millions of refugees, including Palestinians, but Syrians, Iraqis, and others as well.
Yes.
And it simply cannot take more. So it is really unworkable what Donald Trump has proposed, because, of course, Palestinians reject this as well. They do not want to be forced off their land, out of their country. It would be an act of ethnic cleansing. So is this perhaps a way that Donald Trump tries to put on pressure to these countries to accept something else?
So it's a window into perhaps what Donald Trump wants in the longer run. It's been met with a hard no from Egypt, Jordan, and of course all the strong Arab economies as well, as they've come up with this joint statement. But we'll need to wait and watch what comes in phase 2, phase 3, if there is a phase 3, and of course what Donald Trump has in mind for Gaza going forward, as US remains one of the main parties to the negotiations. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Chris Doyle, and pleasure speaking with you. Would like to understand from you what's next in this phase as we move further into this.